Welcome to Ladies Talk Show. This is your host, Leah Richheimer. We are doing something a little bit different today, so you just got to know, sit tight. There's a very, very important topic with Mrs. Rivka Dwek, who's going to help talk us about, huh?
Definitely not Rivers.
Okay, whatever.
But thank you. I'll take it.
Okay. But helping us to understand, issues of postpartum. And I'm not a licensed professional in whatever, but I did feel it was very important to bring this topic to light because it probably affects about 25% of people, whether it's you or whether it's people around you, your friends, family that might be suffering from this. And I thought it was important for us to all know about it. I don't like these big sensational things, this drama story and that drama story, and it stirs up a lot of stuff. It's not me. It's not what we're here for. We're here to increase shalom bias, and because postpartum and the whole area around having babies is so important, how it's handled for shalom bias and feeling closer to our husbands. That's why I felt it important to bring up this topic. But please forgive me. We are walking on untried territory to explore this issue. And if you hear some of the things that she's talking about, what's normal, what's not normal, postpartum behavior or experiences, if it doesn't apply to you, or she'll give exact clear boundaries of what's normal and what's not normal so that we can all learn from it. Oh, yes, I have a friend like that, or that's over there, but we won't take on all of the symptoms that she's going to describe because they can be triggering. So I just wanted to say that as a caveat. But again, Emir Hashem, we've got some very important information to share. So with that, I'd like to introduce Rivki Dwek, who runs an organization that is helping with this. And maybe the first question I'd like to ask you is, what is kind of the emotions and the feelings that women feel postpartum? I know you were saying before having a baby also can be affected. And I just want to kind of a little bit know what's normal so that we can, people aren't thinking, oh, maybe I have that. I've got that. My husband starts talking, oh, this one had this and that and the other. And I'm like, oh, I've got it. Maybe I can't move my finger. I can't move my finger, So I just
Yeah.
want to protect people as much as possible. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It's a real honor to be here and a really important topic. I'm trying to do it justice. So I run an organization in London called Menucha, and we support women who are struggling emotionally as a result of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Um, Having a baby is a very vulnerable time in a woman's life, and it is normal to feel very vulnerable. It is normal to have days which are difficult. It's normal to feel low at some point. It's normal to feel worried and in anticipation of what's going to happen. Um, but um, there is a very clear sort of boundary of when some of these emotions that one may feel may tip into something a little bit more worrying, which is considered a medical illness. And my passion is really around educating women of when they might want to just take a little bit of notice of how they're feeling and ask for support when it's needed. Because unfortunately, perinatal mental health is a very undiscussed topic in our community for various reasons, mostly because motherhood is so central to our lives and there's so much stigma around not coping as such, that it isn't really talked about so often in public. Having said that, it is the ones that ask for help who are the strongest mothers because they want to do right by their children. And I'm going to put that in because I don't want anyone to think that asking for help is a sign of weakness. It's actually really a sign of strength. Um, so, I mean, if
Can I
you think
ask you a
about,
question? You're talking
yeah,
about like in a
yeah.
normal situation where who would be turning to, because that's true. It's like I'm the perfect mother, and I've got my stroller and my whatever. And then you're saying behind the scenes, there could be a different story, and there's nowhere to turn.
Yeah, because nobody's talking about it because
Where would
people are
they
quite
turn?
scared of
Like
it.
where would somebody turn?
So the first person that someone would turn to is probably their doctor, or I don't know how it works in other countries, but here it would be your midwife if it's during pregnancy. And very often these emotional struggles start during pregnancy, but they're passed off as sort of normal pregnancy symptoms. And that's why it's so important to know when it sort of tips into the out of the norm. Um, So it would be their midwife, their doctor, their medical provider, just to sit down with a chat. And what they will often do is just assess them, ask questions about how often these things are happening to them, how it's impacting their functioning, and then often there are treatment plans which are really important to put in place. Early intervention is key with perinatal mood disorders, which is why it's so important to raise this awareness, because the sooner you sort of say, okay, I think we're verging into an issue, the quicker it gets better. And unfortunately, with perinatal mood disorders, they spiral very, very quickly, which means women can become quite
Scary.
sick very quickly. Yes.
Wow.
So I think it's really important just to talk about
It's a medical
it's
disorder,
medical.
or it's an emotional or physical. It just
It's a
hormone.
medical disorder as if you've broken your leg. It's a result of pregnancy or birth. If you think of all the systems in the body which are changing and working around giving birth, which is such a profound, I mean, it's one of them, it's the most amazing thing somebody could ever do, really.
Mhm.
So many things can get out of sync, out of, out of balance. And one of the things that often happens is with hormones. And very often there's a big hormonal component in a perinatal mood disorder. And that's
I'm
why
going to
it's
say, because
wonderful.
she's got this British accent, you can't hear what you perinatal mood disorder.
Yeah.
Mood
Per-
disorder. Interesting. Okay.
Perinatal means conception to about 1 year postpartum. So anytime within that, if somebody starts to struggle emotionally, which is out of the norm for them, we're not talking about people who have struggled throughout their teenagehood and early womanhood
Mhm.
with sort of a generalized anxiety disorder or depression or something like that. We're talking about something that develops during this time, and that is a perinatal mood disorder.
Okay.
And how we measure that is how often it happens to you and how it's impacting you. So it's very normal as a mother to have a day where you feel completely depleted and down and anxious and perhaps a little bit worried, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it took me an hour to put my little one to sleep tonight. Believe me, I have a lot of
Mhm.
frustration.
All right, right,
Um,
right.
on the other hand, is that if we're feeling stable, normal, stable, I hate the word normal, but we are using it. Um, we can bounce back from that and sort of we get up the next day and we continue and we continue our lives and we get up and we do what we need to do. With perinatal mood disorders, it we know that they are a problem if they last for longer than sort of a week and a half to 2 weeks. So if you're feeling, and in Manucha, that's the organization that I run, we often say, know your own normal. If something feels out of sync to you, something doesn't feel normal to you about the emotions that you're feeling, perhaps it's even like more anger than usual, or you're snapping at your husband. This is a Shalom Bias show, if you're snapping at your husband for no good reason, and the poor guy's like, what is happening? What am I doing wrong? And you actually can't explain it to yourself. It's just you just feel so out of control, and that lasts for more than 2 weeks. I would suggest that you go and sit down with somebody and talk about it.
Can I ask you a question? Because
Sure.
how does that differ from baby blues or whatever? Because our baby blues like can last usually like 3 months until the kids, okay, I'm
That's
confused.
a
I'm
complete
confused.
misconception. If your
Okay,
baby
fine.
blues, what we term as baby, okay, so let's talk about what baby blues are. The baby blues are a normal occurrence after you've given birth. Basically, when you're pregnant, your body will produce excess hormones to what somebody who's not pregnant will produce, especially estrogen and progesterone, in order to maintain the pregnancy. Once you've delivered your baby, those hormones dramatically drop, they plummet. And women will feel what some people who are struggling with poor mental health might feel, which is weepy, anxious. You might feel like the mood swings, like, whoa, like you don't know what's happening to yourself. That is within the realms of normal, unless it's absolutely manic, in which you should speak to your midwife or your health provider. But
What
that
does
is
manic mean? What do you mean, manic?
manic means like the mood swings are to complete extremes and happening just regularly. And
Mhm.
with baby blues, you might feel weepy in the morning. In the afternoon, you've picked yourself up and you feel really happy and so overwhelmed with the love. That is normal. And that should taper off by 2 weeks. If it hasn't tapered off by 2 weeks, that might suggest that you might be struggling with something else and it might manifest into something a little bit more sinister. If that is the case, and it has lasted more than 2 weeks, it's really important that you speak to your doctor. It might take some women a little bit more time, but it's important within that time after 2 weeks that you're monitored to make sure that it doesn't develop into something even more.
Sinister is such a scary word. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to
oh,
sensationalize
but
this, but
yeah, no, I just
perinatal mood disorders are not to be
mm,
taken lightly. It is a real medical illness. I mean, when we're talking about mental health, we're talking about the brain, and it's an injury like any other. You have an injury has occurred when you've given birth. And it needs to be taken care of. So I'll try not to use the word sinister because I know it has very scary connotations. But on the other hand, there really has to be a strong understanding of what's within the norm and what's not within the norm. And also that early intervention is so important. It's not something you wait and see. Just speak to your doctor. Nothing's going to happen. They'll just monitor you.
so you're saying
Um,
2 weeks go by, you've had your baby, and 2 weeks go by or whatever, and you had the ups and downs and swings and baby blues and no sleep and whatever. And
yeah.
2 weeks later, you wake up and you still are have
You're
those same.
still having these mood swings. You're still feeling really anxious. You're worried about the safety of your baby. It's very often around safety, not always, but very often around the safety of the baby. You're still checking your baby every 3 minutes, for example, at night, and you yourself are not sleeping, even though baby's sleeping because you're worried. That's a very kind of basic example of some of the things that we might see. If that goes on for more than 2 weeks, you should speak to your doctor. It might be that your body just takes a little bit more time, but it's a little bit out of the norm. Most women will have finished that sort of within 10 days, 14 days. So that's kind of, and it's really important to
No.
explain that that's like that's normal. It's a normal part of postpartum, the first 2 weeks. Anything
Rivki, how
beyond
does
that,
she know? How does a woman know that it's not just her lack of sleeping and that's what's making her tired and grumpy?
beyond the 2 weeks,
Yeah,
it
because
could
the
be,
baby's not
yeah.
sleeping any better past 2 weeks.
So that's a really, really good question. We see a lot of sleep deprived women, and definitely sleep deprivation is definitely a big trigger of a mood disorder. And if a woman is that sleep deprived, that it's causing so much emotional angst within her, then perhaps she needs to seek some support in helping create a routine for a baby. I know routines are in itself, quite a controversial topic. But if that's what you need to make yourself feel better, then that's something that you need to explore. If you're very sleep deprived and it's causing you emotional pain, then really you need to look at how you can get more sleep. I know it's not an easy, it's very simplistic. But there, in Manocha, for example, we have women who really need that sleep. And part of the care that we give them is to provide them, let's say, with a night nurse so that they can get that ample sleep, or to help them to find someone that can take their baby during the day so they can get 2 hours of solid sleep in the afternoon. Sleep is really, really important, but you need to empower yourself. If that is really disrupting your emotional health, you need to find ways to move around that. That's really important.
So the issue though is that usually when someone is underwater,
Yeah,
like they can't throw themselves a life jacket. So
yeah.
we as women, as a community, what can we do to recognize and see they're not they're not coping well and
Okay,
help
so
them?
first of all, right. So first of all, lose the judgment. First of all, lose the judgment. Early motherhood is beautiful and we embrace it and we're so lucky and it's the most powerful thing we can do, but it is challenging. And I think we have to recognize that. And unfortunately, there is this, I mean, I don't know if I can mention social media or anything here, but I think that this generation has taken this turn of everything having to be perfect all the time. And that is not reality at all. And it's causing a lot of destruction. And we have to move away from this. Everybody should have it together. You should be standing at your bris, wearing wearing your Sheva Brachot outfit, and everything has to be together. The rest of the kids have to be completely matching, and then you have to host everybody afterwards. We have to move away from that. The early motherhood is really, really difficult. And actually, I always say that when we travel, one of my favorite things is to go um, to biblical museums, Jewish museums. And I'm always fascinated that there's always a part of a museum which is dedicated to the old-fashioned computering care. So like
What is it?
one,
What care? What kind?
so postpartum care
Oh, okay.
in the olden days. So like I remember recently I was in Rome, they had the cup that they would feed a mother with. They had the recipe of the broth that they used to create to feed the mother with in those first few months after birth. We have to recognize that mums after birth need to be looked after. We're no longer in the olden days where they would keep mums in hospital for 10 days. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the US, but here in the UK, you're shoved out of hospital sort of within 6 hours sometimes if you've had a normal birth, and then you're left on your own. And that is really, really tricky. And I think we have to, first of all, move away from the fact that we can have it all together when we're just given birth. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to help mums in a way that they need help. Not in a way that you feel they need help, but in a way that they need help. The difficulty is that, like you've just said, when you're underwater and when you're struggling, it is very hard to accept help. And that's a separate issue on its own. But I think as a community, we have to recognize that for years and years, we've been looking after mums who have just given birth, and we've moved away from that. There's some, actually, that's not true. There's some amazing organizations around here. We have that will provide meals, that will provide cleaning help, that would send in people to look after the other kids. So we do it, but there's still this kind of perception that everything has to be perfect and look perfect, and we have to snap back and be everything that we need, that we were before, within like sort of a month after giving birth. And I think we have to move away from that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, very much. And what I'm wondering though is how, the line between what's normal issue and what becomes a mental health issue. I'd like to understand that a little bit better and understand that from the perspective of the Shalom Bayis Masorah, which is what everybody's here at the Ladies Talk Show. This is what we're growing in and trying to, is that being a victim, and saying, my husband treats me this way and the world looks this way. And, being a victim, whatever, is very empowering. It's fun. It's like, it's nothing's my fault. Everything's, and we don't want to blame the victim. But on the same token, the way you empower somebody, and this is from our Masorah, the way you empower a woman is let her know there's always something a woman can do. There's always something that we can do to make our circumstances better. Whether, a husband comes every night and he's yelling and screaming, he walks in the door, right? It almost seems like there's nothing. We're total victim to this thing. You know what we can do? We can put a little Ziploc bag with nuts and a canned chocolate bar in his car. So when he comes home, he's not hangry. I'm making up stuff, but I'm just saying there's always something a wife can do that takes her out of the realm of victimhood, which is such a miserable, like you lose all future and what's the hope for the future. If someone loses their hope, it's like, talk about underwater. But anyway, so with that in mind, that a woman for herself doesn't have to be a victim. I want to be able to explain the line between what's normal and where a person needs to get help in a way where it doesn't drive women who really are on this side of the thing of feeling normal, not jumping over here and saying, I need help. I've got a mental health issue.
Right, I hear that.
You totally get what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
100%. And the last thing that we want is women to walk around feeling like they have some sort of disorder when actually the things that they're feeling is very normal. And we have to recognize that motherhood is hard. And it's very, very normal for a woman to feel down and frustrated, sometimes helpless, sometimes, a little bit anxious. It's normal. Everybody has those days. We all have mental health, and we're
And
human.
that her husband isn't helping enough. Hello,
Right,
welcome to
exactly.
motherhood.
And
Thank you.
resentment.
Yes.
Exactly.
Got you. I hear you. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Where it verges into, again, I hate to use the word abnormal, but out of the norm, is when it goes on for a long period of time, like we said before. Because if it's going on for such a long time, something has shifted in the brain, which means that it needs to be corrected in order for you to get back to how you are yourself. And I really loved what you said, Leah, just now about women empowering themselves and not being victims, because the women that call through to our organization are such strong women because they recognize that something isn't feeling normal to them, and they want to do something about it because they want to be healthier, more functional mothers and wives. So there is a real strength in asking for help, a real strength in being honest with yourself. If you're not feeling you're normal, and I stress that because everyone's normal looks different. Some people do have tendency to be a little bit more angry. Some people do have a tendency to snap sometimes. Some people do have a tendency, to worry a little bit excessively. However, if it is going on for, again, 2 weeks or more, and it's impacting your functioning, so that you're so worried about safety that you freeze when it comes to having to drive your kids to school in the morning, or you're not sure if a little bit of the detergent was left in the bottle, for example. So you've made the bottle. I'm going to give an extreme example, even though it's not extreme because it's quite common for women struggling with perinatal mood disorders, that you've changed that bottle 6 times because you're so concerned about having left a little bit of the sterilizer in. Then you need to ask for support. And you're your best advocate. And it's really important that you take stock of how you're feeling and say, okay, something's not right here. I want to get better, and reach out for the right help.
How do you do that to your husband? Because your husband's like, "Oh, come on, you didn't get enough sleep. You didn't whatever. What do you,
Mm.
that's too expensive to call a place and a doctor. And if you go back to the doctor and our insurance doesn't cover
Mm.
that thing, and come on, come on. How do you get over that hump?"
Ooh.
Also to add on to Leia's question, sometimes a woman might feel like, doesn't my husband notice that I'm not feeling the same? Like it's his responsibility to take care of me.
Yeah. I actually want to share with you that when we launched Manucha, I think we all came in with a few assumptions. One of my assumptions was that we would be dealing with some very clueless husbands. And we do deal with clueless husbands. Husbands are not therapists. They're not mind readers as much as we would like them to be. And men work very, very differently to women as well. And they're also fixers, which I'm sure you've spoken about on your show a lot. But they tend to see things a little bit differently. I have been really pleasantly surprised that very often it's the husbands that call through to our info and referral line before their wives to say, I'm really worried about my wife. I recognize that there is something different about her, and I would really like to encourage her. Not that I think she's crazy and I need to get help, but a lot of times it's I want to encourage her to get some support. How can we do that? And
Ooh, I've got
I
goosebumps. That's
believe,
so
no, but I
beautiful.
believe it's the
Mhm.
awareness that we've been putting out that has allowed that. We have done extensive awareness, and we've worked with the Rabbonim in town to do this. And we put out weekly adverts in our local advertiser. I don't know if you've seen them, Debbie. We've done lots of different kinds of workshops, and we actually spent about 6 months before we even launched doing that. And so I think number one is normalizing the topic within the community is so important. This is a normal thing that happens to 1 in 4 women in our community, and no one's immune to it. I think one of the misconceptions that that one of my pet peeves is when women say to me, but it happens to a certain type of woman. No, it doesn't happen to a certain type of, no one is immune to this. And yes, there are women who are more susceptible to it. So there are women who have risks, which means that they may be more likely to develop a mood disorder, but actually no one is immune to it. 1 in 4 women, that's 25% of all births. And I'm going to be honest with you, we started providing therapy 3.5 years ago, now coming up to 4 years now. And we've just done the data, and we actually just partnered with it. We have supported 25% of births in our community. So it's bang on. It's 1 in 4 women suffer. And the thing that I was pleasantly surprised was how supportive husbands are once they understand what's going on.
So, can you just walk us through a woman's it's 3 weeks now, and for the last 3 nights she had a night nurse come for 2 hours a day, or her neighbor or whatever. So it isn't sleep, it isn't lack of sleep, it isn't
Yeah.
lack of whatever. Now she calls you. Walk us through how you help her to heal.
Okay, so we would assess, we don't diagnose, okay, but you would, if you went to your GP, you would get a diagnosis, and we work very closely with our GPs here, but you would get a diagnosis, but basically you can recognize symptom sets. So if a woman is coming to us with symptoms which tell us that she's probably struggling with anxiety, then we would look at a treatment plan which would treat the anxiety. There are 2 main treatment options for a perinatal mood disorder. Like we said before, a perinatal mood disorder is like an injury. It is a medical phenomenon. It's an illness, right? So let's just use the analogy of, let's say, a backache, right? If somebody injures their back, they have to take care of their back, and there are different treatment options. And the same goes to with a perinatal mood disorder. Now, if you have a mild to moderate pain in your back, your treatment option is likely to be physio, osteo, chiropractic, something like that. And for some women, that does it. Now, with perinatal mood disorders, the first thing we would turn to and think about is therapy. Therapy is, when utilized correctly and with, and I'm going to stress this, a specialized perinatal mental health professional. Unfortunately, we have seen quite a few cases where they've continued to see a therapist who's not perinatally trained, and how detrimental that has been. So I'm going to stress that because it's really, really important. Then that is really, really powerful to shift certain things in the brain and to make changes. And women really do quite well with that. Those
Can
are
you
the
give
women
us an
sort of
example? Give me an example of how, what the person walked in with and what kinds of therapeutical, therapy, is that a word?
sure.
What would work?
Therapeutic input. So perhaps again, we'll think about sleep. So somebody is extremely anxious about their baby's sleep and their baby making it through the night. And that's very normal, by the way, at the beginning. When you bring home a new baby, you'll check that baby countless times through that first night, maybe even the second night. But then you sort of get into a rhythm and you trust that you've put your baby down and he's okay and you're going to sleep now and he'll wake up when he needs a feed, and you sort of get into a rhythm. A woman that has a perinatal mood disorder don't get into that rhythm. They will be up every single night beyond those first few days to check that their baby is okay and alive.
After 2 weeks is when we've
After
known
2 weeks, it can
oh,
go on, yeah, and they're
yeah, okay,
exhausted and it's distressing, and they know that it doesn't make sense logically, but
right.
something has triggered something, and they need to check their baby every few
And so
hours,
now they
every
go
five
into
minutes.
therapy. Tell me
Right. So the first thing that we would do is probably therapy. Sometimes, depending on the severity of it, and I was going to come to that next, we might discuss medication, but
okay.
and then we will try and understand what is being triggered, why this has been triggered at this point, and what it is about life and death, for example, and this particular safety issue around the baby. And very often we'll find that they lost somebody when they were younger. They may have lost somebody in their pregnancy. They may have come in contact with some sort of loss. They may have suffered a loss themselves before, and this is just, they want you, right. These all make, it's very normal if you think about it. These are very normal reactions to some really significant life events, but it's coming up in the perinatal period because it very often does, because this is when you're most vulnerable. And then sometimes just making that link, with why this is happening to you is very helpful. Sometimes we will teach management skills, so not teach, but we will work with the client to help them to come up with coping mechanisms, which means that they can calm their systems down. They can tell themselves, baby is okay. I've checked them 2 minutes ago. I know it's okay, and sometimes that takes a while. Sometimes it's every 15 minutes and then it extends to half an hour. That's the therapy part. And usually that would work. Sometimes, like coming back to our back injury, somebody needs to take some sort of medication to alleviate the inflammation so that they can actually do the physio, right? If you're in so much pain, it's very difficult to do the other type of work, isn't it? So if a woman is suffering with these thoughts and they're ferocious and they're scary and they're obsessive and they, and no matter, I mean, we would usually catch it before we went into therapy if it was more at a severe level, and we would probably offer the medication before the therapy, knowing that it would have to work hand in hand.
Yeah,
But these women probably would have to explore therapy and what the medication, and what the medication would do would just calm the system a little bit, stabilize the hormones, the cortisol that's raging through their body, the stress hormone. And once that is calmed down and the edge has been taken, it doesn't cure it. I always say medication is a plaster. You can't do medication without therapy. I'm a big believer. Medication is a plaster. Once that is calmed
What's a
down,
plaster? Sorry,
sorry, a
British.
band-aid.
Oh, bandit.
A
Oh, yeah.
band-aid.
Okay. Okay,
Once,
fine. Okay,
once
yeah.
that has come, I actually get in trouble because I'm not from London and I say plaster and people from London say plaster. So it's always a joke. So here you don't
That's
even know
right.
what a plaster is
I
or a
don't even know
plaster.
what you're talking about. Okay, fine.
So once all of that is calmed down, then they can start to do the therapeutic work and make the links and start to help themselves. And sometimes it works that way, and sometimes they taper off the medication after a couple of months. Sometimes they might be on it a little bit longer. Really, really important things that go very hand in hand, but it's so easily fixed. This is what's so tragic, and we hear so many tragedies, but it's so easily fixed. It's so normal. I mean, come back to that sleeping example that we've just given. It's very normal for someone to have gone through such significant life experiences to be so nervous about sleep, to such a precious thing that you are in charge of. You're responsible for this baby, right? You're responsible to keep it alive. So it's very normal. Perinatal mood disorders are a normal reaction to a huge life event, which is birth. Doesn't affect everyone. It affects a 1 in 4, but you don't have to
So it's
beat
like
yourself up.
they have a normal reaction, but then it just keeps going, and that's what we're
100%.
trying to. That's what we're trying to take a big giant flashlight or a floodlight and show a
Right.
light on it, and saying, if this goes too long, then that means that you need to get assistance. You need to reach out.
100%. And unfortunately, if you don't get assistance, it doesn't get better. I mean, there are women that will say that they got better on their own, but it's quite rare. And it's like any other illness. You need to take medication and it needs treatment plan. And that's something that people have to recognize. This is not your fault. I think often women say to us, you must think I'm crazy. This is my fault. I must have done something wrong. No, no, you haven't. This is an illness like any others. If you break your leg, okay, you might blame yourself for being reckless, but it's just something, you broke your leg. You don't have to beat yourself up about a perinatal mood
Can,
disorder either.
I totally hear it. How do people, because there's such a stigma in the planet Earth about
Mm.
mental health issues, how do people get over that hurdle? Like, there's some people who I know in my head, there's no way. They'll have 14 kids without even, no way are they reaching out. How do we make it
Yeah.
comfortable in our community that people feel comfortable doing that?
Oh, conversations like this are a starter. I mean, it really is about normalizing this. This is normal. 1 in 4 women, that's a lot of women struggle with this. You're not the first one. You're not alone. Women have been through this and have come out the other end and are fine. Myself included, by the way, because this is one of the reasons why I started off Menucha. And I have a background in psychology and still this affected me. It you don't have to suffer. Like there's
What's
nowhere.
So
Sorry.
what's the trajectory? Meaning, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go, now you have it. Now you go into therapy. Now you go into the pills. Is this like they have to be in therapy for 10 years or for 3 months, or
No,
what does it look
no.
like?
So not again. So this is not like a generalized mental health disorder. This is a very nuanced, often short term. It could have triggered lots of other things, but that wouldn't be within the realm of perinatal. Very often we see women, and we bring them up to a point where they are feeling like they are functioning and they are managing as a mother and they're finding joy in motherhood. That's actually our catchphrase. Motherhood can be a joy, and it really can be. It's really hard, but it's really beautiful and fun. And we'll bring them to a point where they feel like they are present for their children and they are aware of what's going on for them. But it's not uncommon for something else to have been touched within that therapy, where we may have uncovered a link why they're feeling some way, and actually that might need long-term therapy. And that's some women. Other women, off they trot and they're as happy as pie. Something was triggered during the birth trauma is huge. By the way, coming back to husbands, 1 in 10 men struggle with a perinatal mood disorder as well, and we get calls from men. We're actually at the moment trying to think about how we can help them, but 1 in 10 men also struggle. So if your husband is completely out of character, just be aware of that as well. 1 in 10 men struggle. Their hormones also change. I can't go into it now, but it's fascinating. And Hashem has made it like this, by the way, so that we are primed to look after our young.
So this has been very, very eye-opening, and the way you handled it and everything like that with everybody, I feel like we're all smarter without being terrified or traumatized. But the question I have for you, just what is one thing you want to leave, one message that you want to leave, one homework assignment that you want to leave with our audience, that they will, that now that they've learned more about this issue, what's the take-home thing that they can do both for themselves and for the community?
Wow, that's a big question. um, I think it's two things. I think speaking to the community as a whole is I would urge you to educate yourself on this. And I think that if you're a leader of your community and you feel that this is something that is affecting your community, you can lead on that. I mean, we were bowled over by the Rabbonim, to be honest. We were actually warned by the NHS, which is the health service, that we would get backlash from the rabbis, as they said, and we got none. They are our biggest supporters. It's from all fractions. And if you're a leader in your community, speak out, because I know that we're changing the next generation. I know that the children are healthier, that marriages are healthier, that homes are healthier. And I am sure of that. And I know that from the feedback that we're getting from both husbands, wives, and sometimes children as well. That's if you're in the community. And then I'm going to speak straight to women who are listening, who are struggling, because, you know, to me, if you're sitting there and you're feeling, wow, that's me, you're not alone. You're really not alone, and you don't have to suffer. And there is so much joy to be found in this gift that we've got from Hashem of rearing children and looking after children and bringing up the next generation and continuing the legacy of what is Yiddishkeit. And it's in your hands. And you are your best advocate. You are responsible to make sure that you are well enough as a mother to be able to carry that out. And you shouldn't feel ashamed. This happens to so many women, and you're not alone. And I can tell you so many women who have been in your place and are on the other side and are stronger. And first of all, it's strength to ask for help, but also they are stronger and the most unbelievable mothers. And I just feel so strongly that I understand the pain that these women are feeling, having also been there myself. So I'm taking off my professional hat at the moment. And you're not alone. And there really is help, and there is light on the other side. So reach out to someone. Look if there is a perinatal mood disorder organization in your community, or go and speak to your GP. You really will feel a lot better quite quickly, I think.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Mrs. Dweck, for being with us. This has been eye-opening and very helpful. And please God, all of the women who need some assistance in this will reach out. And for those of you who have friends and family members or whatever, you'll have a radar so that we can all have an aliyah in shalom bayis and an aliyah in our neshama, and that the mental health, whatever it is that affects the brain, Hashem should soften and ease and help us because we're all in this together, trying to help each other, that Hashem will make it easier on all of Israel. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Fabulous being with you. This is Leah Richheimer for the Ladies Talk Show. We'll see you next time.